Hello friends, welcome back to chapter 7 of this Android series, and today we will study about background jobs in Android. So just preparing up your base, background jobs in Androids are something which are implemented using worker threads. Like now there is a class called as worker. This class worker class has to be extended, and then you can do up the background jobs. So why exactly are background jobs important? Let's talk about it. But before we talk about the importance of background jobs, let us understand a concept which is called as multi-threading. So I will just say this thing that there are these two blocks you can see. The first block is UI thread and then a slash background thread. Second is asynchronous and synchronous call. So these are two things which you must be knowing before you say that you are using multi-threading concept. So when you are working on multi-threading concept, these are the two things which are very important for you to understand, which are like these two UI threads and background threads and synchronous and asynchronous. So let us go ahead and first let us talk about this, which is UI thread and background thread. What exactly are they? So what is a thread? What is a thread? A thread is nothing but a execution. Like whenever you say that some execution is happening, what exactly is happening? There is some instruction which has been passed to the CPU via the high level language. And whenever you say that this instruction is passed to the CPU, this instruction is being passed by a thread. So thread is nothing but a calling function. A calling function. You can say this thing, the calling function. When you call a function, so a thread calls a function and the job is done. So it is something which does your job. What is thread? It is something which does your job. So when you say that you have this emulator, and on this emulator we have been building up this activity. So this is nothing but a thread which is like taking track of your activities. You say that you're sliding this thread is making this slide, and when you like go to the end, this thread moves on to the next activity. So you can compare a thread to a living person which is doing some task. So this is on your front end and on your UI, whatever is done by this living app. So this application is itself a thread which like owns the main thread. So there can be a main thread and there can be some child threads. So in the similar fashion, this main thread is nothing but the UI thread. So in Android, this UI thread is the main thread, and the background threads, these are the threads like which does your job, and these are nothing but just simple threads which are like popped out from the main thread, and then these threads does your background jobs. So this was basically about some glimpse about UI threads and background threads. If you want to go deeper, I would like recommend you to read about java.util.concurrency. So this is something using which like you can implement three things. One is executors, and then we have future, and then we have a thread pool. So these are few subclasses which have been like derived from concurrency, and like you can use them to implement threading, and this is what is being used by Android itself. So Java, like Android recommends you to always use java.util for dot concurrency for long taking background tasks. Where to use them, how to use it, we will discuss about it. Let's discuss about another thing which is async and synchronous call. So what is async and synchronous call? To understand this concept, let me jump to my Android Studio and let me go over here and create a new Java file and say new Java file, and let me name this file to be the get data from server. Let me hit an enter. So as you see that this class get data from server has these two parentheses, which is this here on line 5 and it ends at line 10. So just assume for an example that you are writing up this class which is actually getting up your data from the server, and this particular class object is called inside a worker thread. So in the worker thread you are making sure that you are getting the data from the server and then you're putting it in the SQLite database of the app, for an example. So what you will do here, you will make a HTTP call to your server and you will get some data. After getting some data, you will again make some HTTP call and you will get some more data. So there might be a scenario that you are getting data from 3 HTTP calls in this particular case, and you get some more data. So what is synchronous and asynchronous call? Synchronous and asynchronous call. So what are these? When you say that you are making up a synchronous call, then this first request will go, and until it receives the response for this request, the thread calling of this request will wait. So there will be a thread which called up this particular class, and this thread now is calling up this HTTP call. So when you say that this is synchronous, it means that this particular call request will go and come back, and then this thread will move forward next, then it will make another call and then come back, then it will make another call and then come back. So this is how synchronous calls are done. And what are asynchronous call? So in asynchronous call, this call will be gone, this call will be gone, this call will be gone, and the thread which called up this class moves out of this parenthesis. So it does not wait for the results which are being which are being received by these HTTP call. Rather, it just moves out of this braces, and it is done. So asynchronous call is something which is used for increasing the performance. And why exactly we are talking about synchronous and asynchronous call over here is because this is something which will be required to understand the worker threads. So now let us understand the usage of background jobs, and then we will implement the worker. So if I just paste it over here and say the uses of background jobs. So when I say that I have this application and I move the slider till the end, and as soon as I move it till the end, I am taken up to the next activity. So you can assume that I have been logged in, right? So as I log in, there might be a requirement that as the user logs in, the application checks the server if there is any update and it brings back some information from the server, and that might take time. So you do not want to block the UI thread. You do not want the application to halt or go into a state which cannot be changed. So you keep it working, you keep the user can do anything on the UI, but there will be a background job, a background thread initiated from the UI which will do your job. And that is how this is how we what is done using the worker threads. So you can use it for getting information from the server, sending information to the server, and then you might use it for some periodic jobs. You want a job to be repeated after every 10 minutes, so you might use it for periodic jobs. And then you can use it for enqueuing jobs. So there might be a scenario. What is enqueuing jobs? So let us see this picture. This diagram has been given in Android itself. So if you see this picture, you can say that there is a job A. At first you want to run this job which does just specific work, and then you want to run B and C parallelly. So these two jobs will be executed parallelly. As B finishes, so there is no dependency of C in DNE, but DNE are dependent on B. As the B1 finishes, it goes and like executes D and E. So these are like few uh, like like a complex case in which you might have to run few jobs one after another, and there might be a difference in scenario. So all these things can be like taken care of by the worker thread. It can do all of these things. Now let us go ahead and like start building up the worker thread. So as you see that we have already said get data from the server. So we will be getting up the data from the server, and we will be applying this worker as soon as the person logs in. So as soon as he swipes to the very right and he reaches up this particular activity, which is nothing but the fragmented activity. So as soon as this onCreate method is called, we will be starting up this worker thread. So how to implement a worker thread? So to implement a worker thread, first we will have to import the libraries, and we import the libraries in the Gradle file. So as in Maven, if you have used Maven, Maven is nothing but a repository like tool which helps you like maintain your repository of your application. In the same way, Gradle file is the place where you can define the all the jar files which will be used via this applications, and then you will have to extend and use this class which is worker in the like file which we just created, this class which we just created, which is get data from server. We will have to extend the worker class here, and then at the end we will have to schedule when this worker class will get like executed. So these are the three simple steps, and let us like at first import it. So in Android over here, you can see that you have two types of build.gradle. One is project and second is the module. So anything like which is required by your like application is presented in the module level. So let me open up the module level. Let us also open the project level. In the project level repository, like you just define the things like which are to the project, and like I have seen very less changes which are required actually by the developer to make over here. So most of the changes will be in the module level, where you can see like which SDK version this is compiled on, which minimum API level, Android API level this is like performing, then your application ID. In the similar way, you have a column which is dependencies. Down here you can see dependencies, and this is where like you can like type in your dependencies. So as you can see up the dependencies from line 33 till 42, these are the dependencies which are required by the worker thread. You can just take a screenshot, might be. So I will just let me just yep. You can take a screenshot. These are the dependencies which are required, and after like saving them, it will not pick up all the imported libraries by itself. You will have to tell Android Studio like, yes, I have made some changes in the Gradle file, please pick up these dependencies also. So you will have to go to file and just say invalidate cache and restart, and this will restart up your Android Studio. So Android Studio is gone, and like this is being restarted again, you can see out here. So all of these files have been imported. Before like going ahead and like implementing it, let me discuss on something which is called as Android X. So you can see over here that this implementation is made by Android X, but like we are still into uh, something app comeback like stage. So there are different API levels which have been built by Android. So few years back they were using app combat, and now they have filled few APIs which are in Android X, and then you can like use these APIs even in app combat. Like in this case we are using this in app combat method. But there is in refactor you can see there is something called as migrate to app combat and migrate to Android X. So these are different versionings of their complete set of APIs, and you can use them like as and when required with different features. So whenever you're using a feature and it requires you to change into Android X, like the Android Studio will pop up and tell you like please migrate to Android X, and like you will have to click over here and do this. As of now, this is not required out here. We have just added up the dependencies, and these dependencies are now being loaded, and now we can go back to data server and just say extends and say worker thread, let it extend worker thread, and as it extend worker thread, there is a something which is here, and this particular statement is imported. If you can see, this statement comes from android x.work.workers, which is part of the API, which is android x. And now it says that I will have to implement few methods. Let's implement them, and let's say implement methods. As I implemented, there is a method called as do work which gets implemented, and as it does not have the constructor, that's why it is giving up this error. Let me also define the constructor. So now this worker thread is perfectly fine, and we are set up with this class which is extending worker. So whatever we do here is nothing but the work which we want to be done uh, by the background job. So whenever you call this particular worker from the UI, it will create another thread and it will assign it this function, which is do work, and whatever will be done inside this do work will be your actual work which is done by this particular thing. And this you can like reiterate it, you can schedule it, like you can say like please schedule it after every 30 minutes, please redo this work again and again. So an instance is you are creating up an app like AutoFunnel is an app which is like taking up and seeing up your Gmail account every 2 hours for any new lead which you may get from Just Dial or IndiaMart. So every 2 hours, this worker is scheduled, which like goes to your Gmail and like extract your email and then like does a job. In the similar way, like you can do a lot of jobs over here. And now the point is how we are going to call it from the front end. Let us go ahead and see the fragmented activity. So this is the activity where we were like planning to put up this worker. As soon as this activity starts, this worker should also start. So just to check that this is going good, what we will do is we will like set up a periodic worker which will run after like every uh, 10 minutes. So this is the minimum time, like I think like which is allowed. So this will be something like we will be calling up a worker over here, and like we will be scheduling it periodically, which will be the last part of this worker thread. So how to do this thing, like how to schedule a worker periodically? Let me show it to you. Just copy it, go back to Ender Studio, let me paste it, let me delete all of them. So these are a few classes which you will have to learn. So there is one class which is constraint, and this is again you can go and like take constraint from android x dot worker, because this constraint is for worker. Then again you can like import this class, and like this is will again come back from worker, and again like this is nothing but a work manager, and this should also come back from android x. So you can see out here in the import statements you have android x dot work dot constraints dot periodic work request. All of them are from android x dot work, right? So these are the like things which you have taken, and then there is a worker class you can see, and then there is time in hours, and then time unit is another class which you have to take out here, and this is a policy which is again required. So we will learn about these three things in a second. Let us first uh, take up everything, and let us give the request name to be just the request name. So this is a unique work name, which like if you have 10 work requests, like some like these, this is a class, this is a worker class, like this you have 10 classes. So you will have to define unique name for each one of them, and this is nothing but the context. So let me say get application context, which will be getting of the context, and this is my worker class which is get data from server dot class. And then when time in hours, let's change it into 20, and let's say seconds. So we want this particular periodic request to be repeated after every 20 seconds. And now let's see how exactly this works. So at first we had the constraints. So we are setting up the constraints when this worker should not work. So you say that set requires battery not low. So if the battery is low, this will not contact the server and do a lot of stuff. So obviously like you do not want your user to like switch off his or her mobile because of your background job, and you want to optimize and build a better performing application. That's why this is required. Set requires charging. Please like send up this worker or start this worker only when the charger is enabled, when the phone is connected to a charger. So obviously you will select it false over here, and in most of the cases, 99.9% of the cases, you should select false over here. Then you are saying that you are creating a periodic request which should repeat itself after an interval of time. What interval of time? Which is 20 seconds, and like this is something like which is seconds. So here this is our worker class which we have created, and in this work class we have a do work function which will get called as soon as these two statements are executed, which is 39 and 34. So these are nothing but like the constraints and like the prerequisite objects which are required by work manager dot get instance. So this is something, work manager is a class from Android which manages the works, and to start a work you just need to say enqueue like unique periodic work. So this is for unique periodic work. In the similar way, like at this particular fashion we have a lot of other things like which can be done in like workers. So let me show up and like tell you about that before we go ahead and like execute anything. So let me just copy it and let me paste it over here. So in the same way you can see that here also, like here we do not have these two statements which are starting from 29 till 38. So it says that there is a worker manager and you're getting the instance of the worker manager, and then you're just saying worker.enqueue. So like this particular class, we have another class which is this, which is one time work request. Like periodic work request, we have one time work request, and this is something like which does not repeat itself after an interval of time. It does the job once and that's it. So this is how it is created. You need to create a new function and then say builder, and as we have this class over here, we can pass the class over here and then say just dot build. After like building in like we can see the work which is getting done, and in the similar way like you can see that this particular thing which sees like if which gets the live data. So there is something called as live data for your work information, and like you can say that work manager to get work info by live data, live id data, and you just like request the id request dot data. So this request is nothing but this work request which is this, and you are like getting up the live data in this particular status. You're tracking up this worker thread, nothing else. Then here in this particular part you are enqueuing multiple requests. So you are just saying that create one work request, second work request, third work request, and then at the end work manager dot begin with. So these two will be like done in parallel. After these two will be done, then the third will be done this, and like at the end you're just saying enqueue. So enqueue is the function which actually is like starts up your worker thread. In a similar way over here also, like at the end, like you can just, you're just enqueuing these requests, and like they will get enqueued and like executed by themselves. So if I just go ahead and see some more things like this, so this is something which is implementing up this figure. So if you see up this particular figure, this figure is implemented up by this code, which is nothing but this. So you see here, over here it says that work continuation. There is a class which is work continuation, and it like makes sure that you can schedule all the jobs like this complex query job. So how exactly this works? There is a class work continuation, and you create an object continuation, and then work manager dot begin with a. So it will begin with a. After that it says continuation, then b, then de. So this particular continuation was at a till here, and then you say that after this continuation then this, and then after b we have de, and then this enqueue, and in parallel to b we say that please continue then c. So this becomes in parallel, and these two are done after this b. So this is how like this continuation is made. In the similar way, like you can use these all classes to build up any type of complex behavior. So with workers, all you need to know are like there are few major classes such as constraint, periodic work request, work manager, then work request, for every request, then work continuation. Then you build up your like request, and at last you enqueue them. So enqueuing them is very important. Here you are building up your request and then you are enqueuing it. As you enqueue them, these like requests get executed. So in the similar way, like here also like you are seeing that we are enqueuing them, right? So these are the different ways and like different types of work requests which you can do, and like a work is defined by a class which extends worker, and what is like being triggered as work, which is do work. So here now we are back in get data server, and you can see that I have put upon two logs over here, one in the constructor saying work thread get work has been initiated, and one log in the do work. So you will have to put up this log before return. So this is the log, and this log will be printed up when the work get started. Let me save it, and here we have everything out here, and we see that like we have set up a periodic request. So you can see the code from this is the code for periodic request. So let me go ahead and run it now, and let us open up the logcat for us. So the application is being started and installed on the Android emulator. So as you can clearly see, it says that class file for this particular thing is not found. It means that there is some library which is missing. So there is no issue in the code, but there is some library is which is missing. So you can see over here that this particular com.google, this is not written by us. This is pre-written, and like it says that this is not found. So some file is using it and like this is not found. If I go back to my build.gradle, this was what like I have imported up as of now. Let's see this and discuss few things about it. The first thing is the version variable. You see that I have defined DEF version work version 2.2.0. So it is very important for you to make sure that whenever like you implement or like include all these libraries, you are including them of the same version. So sometimes when you like choose up different versions for different libraries, it does not work. For example, like work runtime is a library which you are like fetching up, and it has a version 2.2.0, but GCM, which is Google Cloud Messaging, has a version which is 2.3 point something or like 3 point something. So there can be a mismatch, and like things won't work. So it is very important for you to make sure that whenever you include few libraries, you read about the versioning of these libraries and like how what is the best compatible match of this versioning. So here you see one thing, like we are been excluding the listenable future. This is what like the error is about, and this is in something into Google.guava, which is a library, Java library. So you can see that this listenable future is excluded in both the places. So we can include it over here because we are actually not using Google Cloud Messaging. That's okay. Otherwise, like we can just not exclude it, and like I think like this should work now because mistakenly like I think that I have excluded in both the places, so this should work. So let me go ahead and like go to files and say invalidate cache and restart to make sure that this particular Android gets that we have changed something over here, and this also like includes this guava file. So it seems that the build has been successful. You can see in the build tab over here, like build finished at this point, and let me go logcat and like start running the application. So the application is getting installed, and it is installed. And let me select up this simulator, which is I think already selected. Let me just cut this and see all the logs. So there was a filter applied over here. And let me just move it ahead. And as I move it ahead, you can see up this line, which says that do work has been called. So as of now, you see that do work has been called, and like whatever like what we have implemented is like in fragmented activities. We just like started up this worker over here in these two lines. We enqueued it and like it got called. And if I go over here, it says like this work function has been executed, which is do work. So whatever you need to do work, you can write it over here. But one point is like In fragmented activity, you say that this particular work should be repeated after 20 seconds. So here in this particular area, you say that this work should be repeated after every 20 seconds, but which is not true. You can count up till the time like we started up this conversation, like we did executed this, and like there has like been few seconds which have already been passed, but the second request will not come up like after 20 seconds. This is a false. Like the minimum time is 15 minutes. So you can like shoot up a request, and after that like you can shoot up another request of the same worker thread like after 15 minutes. This is the minimum time, and like even if you keep it 20 seconds, it will not work. You will have to keep it in minutes over here, which is time unit dot minutes, and I think that this should be in caps minutes. And like now this will work in 20 minutes. That's okay. Above 15 it will take up, and now say that now the worker thread will work in 20 minutes. Similarly, if you have to work in hours, then like you can say just 2 hours, and like first it will get repeated at 1, and then it will get repeated at 3, but the minimum is 15 second. Second point is like you can see that over here, like this started at 20:49:43, and it has already been 20:51. So it means that 20 seconds passed, but the second thread has not been called. So just for this tutorial, I have taken up this screenshot. So you can see in the screenshot like the first time is 2:05 and then 2:20. It started at 2:56, and it like started at like after 15 minutes 10 seconds. So one more point which you should remember is like worker threads never like shoot up at the exact time as you say. If you say that first request should go after a time, and like the second should go after 15 minutes, it will not go exactly after 15 minutes, but it will go by like 15 minutes and few seconds. Why? Because it looks for various things, like if the CPU is free, if you have good RAM. So worker thread like has its own priority, and like it gets executed as and when like the phone is in a good condition. So this is something which is very important for you to know. And like I just took up the screenshot to make sure that you see that even like this particular request was called to be for called for 15 like 20 seconds. It should have called in within 20 seconds, but it does not get called. It gets called after 15 minutes again, right? So this was like the major things about the worker, and like how all you can implement the worker in Android. But like just before we go ahead and close up this chapter, there was one more point which we like are required to discuss with it, which is nothing but like the async and like synchronous call. So whatever we have discussed as of now as per worker, this all things like are done in like as per the synchronous call. So this worker thread, whichever like we have discussed, is always recommended by Android, but this is synchronous. So there might be a chance you would like to apply up the asynchronous call. So let's see like how exactly we can do this. So for at first you can just read over here. This is the Android documentation, and you can see over here that which says that this particular method is for synchronous processing of your work. And if you want asynchronous processing of your work, then you should use listenable worker. So listenable worker versus listenable worker, this is the parent class of worker, and like this like gives you the mechanism of listening your workers, and like you can wait till the time you get the results, and that's why like you can create multiple thread pools. So this concurrency like can be done with the help of thread pool or executors and listenable worker. Obviously like I will not be going so deep into this tutorial on this. My intention was to make sure that you are capable of reading up these documentations by yourself. So guys, stay tuned. Please do subscribe to the channel, and please do tell your friends so that I would be able to help them grow like enormously within the technical area. Thank you guys. Have a great day.